Good morning, and really great to have you all here with us. Thank you for coming. We're just going to be getting started right now, just to make the best use out of our time. My name is Muna Dajani, and I'm a fellow in environment at the Geography and Environment Department at LSE. I'm also a Palestinian researcher that is interested, has been interested in water and environment and farming for a few years now. And I'm really delighted to be chairing this session today. This session is entitled Roots of Resistant Farming in Palestine. And it's really a pleasure to be sharing it with really great colleagues and comrades. Unfortunately, Lina Isma'il couldn't be with us today. She sends her apologies for not being able to make it. So I'll have two hats on. I'll be a chair, but I'll be also presenting her slides, doing my best to present the slides that she has kindly shared with us. So I'll just briefly start kind of situating the session in the current moment of genocide that we have been witnessing quite brutally on our mobile screens, in every aspect of our lives. This genocide has been only an intensification of a decades-long process of erasure of Palestinian existence on the land throughout historic Palestine, throughout different fragmented geographies of Palestine since the beginning of the 20th century. But what we've seen today is that there is complicity, there is really erasure of a world order, there's erasure and kind of a disregard of international law, and so many different kind of convictions and principles that should have brought us together as humanity. We also in Gaza have been witnessing, a severe erasure of a meaningful Palestinian presence on the land, reducing people and land to a state of complete non-existence. So these tactics not only really impose social, societal, and ecological death, but they also erase indigenous presence and autonomy. So Gaza for decades has been undergoing an illegal siege, meaning it was an open-air prison for many decades. And even before that, it has always been characterized and confined to a state of exceptionalism that we and the speakers will be also talking about today. A lot has been shared characterizing Gaza as being uninhabitable, unlivable, unfit, unsuitable for human life. But we're here also to reject that characteristic and to kind of really unpack and examine the underlying conditions that have allowed and have really imposed that condition of uninhabitability on Gaza. And how best can we do that is to talk about the food we grow, the food Palestinians have been trying to hold on to, the seas that they have been trying to protect, and an actual presence on the land that they're trying to establish. So again, I'm really delighted to be sharing this panel with great speakers that have so much extensive knowledge and have shown really unwavering solidarity with Palestine as well. I'll introduce the speaker quickly, and then I'll be presenting on behalf of Lina. Then we'll hear from the speaker. So just to introduce Lina. Lina Isma'il is a Palestinian food sovereignty activist and co-founder of the Palestinian Agroecology Forum. Lina supervised studies on food sovereignty in Palestine, and she also worked on the documentary Untold Revolution, Food Sovereignty in Palestine. She is also the co-author of the guidebook Conscious Choices, a guidebook to ethical shopping in Palestine that me and her worked on together. We have George McAllister. George is part of the scholar activist collective Agroecology Now. As a political agroecologist, she specializes in food and farming in conflict-affected and disaster-prone environments. In recent years, she's been part of a team from Gaza and the UK doing action research on Gaza's foodways to strengthen food sovereignty at the urban and the territorial level. And we also have Cathi Pawson. Cathi co-founded Zaytoun 20 years ago after working in Palestine's West Bank with farming communities on land access. Zaytoun tangibly supports those communities through growing a market for their products and through sharing their stories of farming under occupation. So really, at this really horrific moment of genocide, we really are all collectively really realizing the importance of telling the storytelling, and what storytelling can really tell us about the resilience of the people behind the stories, the people who are doing and risking their lives at certain instances also to preserve and continue living under these horrific conditions. If it's possible to put the first, yes. So I might move because it's just easier. Okay, so I'm doing this on behalf of Lina, so the slides are hers. But me and Lina have been working for a long time. We're very, very close friends and colleagues. And we have been also exploring and witnessing also the rise of the agroecology movement in Palestine. And it started with permaculture and ecological farms and all sorts of projects that were really quite inspiring and that have exposed to us kind of the resilience and the knowledge that our ancestors have held on to despite all these processes of erasure. So I think maybe many of you are aware of the context, but it would be good also to see what does it actually mean to carry out any meaningful and dignified farming in Palestine, and what has happened since the 20th century to get us to the point of witnessing enforced starvation and famine wreak havoc on the Palestinian population in Gaza. We start, honestly, with just showing this map that tells us quite a lot of what happens in terms of loss of access to land and to resources. Palestinians who have been possessing and nurturing relations with the land for generations have, throughout the decades, because of British colonial rule in Palestine, that has also given kind of the green light for a settler colonial project, the Zionist settler colonial project to take hold of Palestinian land. We have seen kind of the erasure of Palestinian presence on the land. So it is really, truly a material erasure on the land, but it also holds so much erasure of knowledges, of traditions, of practices, of livelihoods and identities that have been completely erased. So can we only imagine how a refugee would be moving from their land? It's Palestinian society is predominantly an agroecological society, so really depend on land beyond, agricultural production, because land also meant, identity and belonging as well. So we can imagine what happens here in terms of erasure. So not only were Palestinians displaced, whether throughout the geographical areas inside Palestine as internally displaced communities, but also to the surrounding countries. So this loss of land continued unabated under settler colonialism, because settler colonialism is a project of erasure. So its intention is to erase and to replace with a new society, a settler colonial society that looks at technological innovation, that looks at transformation of what seemingly seemed to be for the settler a barren land, a primitive land that required advancement, required technology and modernity, right? So we get to a point today where Palestinians are living in what has been termed as Bantustans, relating it to and comparing it to apartheid regimes such as South Africa, but even more so to the settler colonial regime that is even further, that uses settler apartheid policies, but also has wider intentions. So that is at the heart of it, the physical, the material loss that Palestinians have been not only experiencing, but grappling with as a community that is living on the margins of their own ancestral land. What happened is that, of course, Israel as a settler colony has also kind of capitalized on Palestinian farmers and what we call fallahin, peasants, who knew the land so well, to kind of transform the land with them as and identifying them, as cheap labor. But also within their kind of modernity project, they also kind of enlisted and started promoting monoculture and introducing input materials into this monoculture that they were advancing to the West Bank. So these are pictures from the 1967 after Israel occupied the West Bank, doing a lot of field trips and visits to showcase that modernity and agricultural development that they were seeking through monoculture. And basically what happened here is that there was a shift of agricultural production, a loss of seeds, a loss of kind of the meaningful kind of articulation and use, utilization of traditional knowledge, of baladi, or which is like local seeds, propagation, for example, or actually complete transformation of the crops that we actually grow in the West Bank. So these are the conditions, but there are also actors in place that have also facilitated kind of an exodus and even a complete detachment of Palestinians from their land. Most notably, of course, the Israeli occupation, but also a lot of actors came into the pictures, like the Palestinian Authority, that came in as an interim self-government authority. But what did it mean for agriculture? It meant that there is a replication of the settler colonial modes of monoculture agricultural production, of market-centered agricultural sector that even didn't get a lot of priority, to be honest. And then also the fact that, international aid flowed in, and international aid was interested in also transforming Palestinian economy in general to show that an economic peace is possible with Israel. So that meant for agriculture a complete disregard of Palestinian agricultural knowledge and traditional practices, a complete disregard of the Palestinian diverse baladi production, and really a focus on cash crops, market-oriented, export-oriented products under the system. And it's also, of course, all heavily confined and hegemonically controlled by Israel. So Palestinian areas became kind of the backyard and a backyard market for Israeli low-quality food products. Palestinians who produce with traditional methods did not really have any grounds to compete with that influx of those products. And that is one level of it. There's also complete control of the borders, complete control of export mechanisms that any Palestinian farmer could not compete with. So there is that in place. So can you, with me, imagine how a farmer living under these conditions, where we have three different areas in the West Bank with three different administrative and military jurisdictions, where Israel basically controls most of the agricultural areas and areas of potential agriculture, especially in the rich Jordan Valley, trying to develop any sort of agriculture. How will Palestinian farmers, for example, if they manage to get access to water, which is also heavily controlled, completely controlled by Israel, there's a permit system in place that makes it illegal for any Palestinians to drill a well without Israel's approval. So let's assume that we manage to do any type of agriculture. How will that produce that comes out of these agricultural activities reach other areas? Because it's not allowed to move produce in between different jurisdiction of A, B, and C that we mentioned here. So I'm really rushing through it because I want also to tell you to situate what's going on in terms of what's going on in Gaza with a process, a decades-long process of dispossession. So on top of all of that, there are checkpoints in place, Israeli checkpoints that really limit Palestinian connection between the areas, Palestinian movement of people, let alone movement of produce and agricultural inputs. We have also Israel's apartheid wall, and Israel's apartheid wall also cut through the West Bank and also expropriated large swaths of agricultural land. So the typical realities and experiences of farmers is that they have to stand for hours in order to get access to their olive groves, for example, during times of harvest, which most of the time is denied or really given at a very delayed time when all the crops fail. We also, as I mentioned, water is an important part of it. Without water, agriculture will not work. And farming, resilient farming, will not really actually take any meaningful shape. So we've got total Israel controls more than 80% of the West Bank. No controls, steals most of the water resources in the rich aquifers under the West Bank. So we have now we have a picture of what it means to carry out any meaningful farming in Palestine. But also farming can cost you your life, especially since October 7, 2023, but also before that. Because even if we look throughout the span of 1 week, and any week, especially the weeks in September where it was the olive harvest, Bilal Aoudeh was shot and killed while he was harvesting olives on his land in Sawiya village. If you look just quickly, the violence inflicted on Palestinian farmers is systematic. It's carried out by the Israeli state, but also by Israeli settlers, illegal settlers who live on lands in the West Bank. It can take different forms, from intimidation to abduction to killing of livestock, burning and torching of olive trees. If we can look at a staggering number that 1 million olive trees have been either uprooted or torched by Israel since 1967. So this is a reality of Palestinian farmers. You're carrying out farming, resilience, and actually doing it in a resilient way to stay on the land, to have a meaningful presence on the land under these conditions of confinement. And as we said, farming is not just about growing crops. It's not about income generation. For Palestinians, farming is about connection to the land. It has a political subjectivity because of those processes and structures of erasure. So we can imagine the harm that has been inflicted on Palestinians when they were not allowed to harvest their olive trees in 2023 and continuously so in 2024. And that was also a devastating blow to many farmers who rely on it for their income generation. But also, it's a right to be in your olive groves and to grow. So a lot of, there is a lot online, a lot of documentation of what it means actually to survive this settler colonial reality, especially for farmers. And I really wanted to also kind of speak about, or Lina also wanted to speak about, how there is also a really important kind of clarification to make, because Palestine also has been moving in the Western and in the Eurocentric worldview from a liberation movement, from a struggle for liberation that is at its heart around land and resources, to a nation-state building endeavor, right? And with that, it has moved into kind of this idea that it can be possible to do economic peace, it can be possible to open capitalist market to Palestinian economy, especially, and also to agricultural economies, to ensure that a Palestinian state will exist. With that, there has been a lot of these narratives of food security, for example, and the idea that that international aid is coming in to help Palestinians achieve food security. And this is quite widely rejected within the agroecology movement in Palestine, because what it does is normalize the occupation, and what it does is also normalize the intensive erasure and dispossession of Palestinians from the land. And food sovereignty is quite now established also in the Palestinian farming and farmers movement, because it also exposes to us that food is not just about ensuring that you have certain calories intake or that you have certain products available for you to access and to nourish your body and your soul, but it's also about dignity, and it's also about these non-material and the value-laden aspects and attributes that bring you back to the essence, bring you back to the land. And what Israel does and the international community actually acquiesces to is this idea that Palestinians can be food consumers only, and that we should be grateful for that. And this is what the movement rejects completely. I'll leave the Gaza slides because I think these are the old ones, for George to actually speak of. But I really wanted to take the time. I don't know how much time I have, but it should be. Sorry, thank you. Okay, not a lot. But to kind of tell a story also of resilience. I think what is really important is that when we talk about, agroecology in Palestine and Palestinian farming movement is that we acknowledge the realities on the ground are really exceptionally horrific, as I mentioned now. But that doesn't mean that Palestinians are succumbing, they're accepting, or that are only framed as victims of those systems. Our ancestors and our intergenerational knowledge has been really safeguarded by many amazing individuals and collectives and connections and kinship that has really helped a lot of Palestinian heirloom seeds, baladi products to continue surviving. So me and Lina have gone through this really beautiful journey throughout Palestine to meet a lot of local producers in 2018, I think, and then again also in 2020. And then just meeting these people who do it out of their own conviction and principles and stewardship to ensure that Palestinian presence on the land remains meaningful and remains dignified. So they take different forms. Then we've got like the one that really cherishes and respects intergenerational knowledge and seed preservation, like Musa in Burin village. So she has been holding on to these okra seeds from the times of her grandmother. So you've got that intergenerational knowledge and respect of this knowledge and appreciation of it. And also the utilization of it as not a relic of the past, but actually as a way for us to survive under these brutal conditions. And we've got Saad Dagher, who is also dubbed as the father of agroecology in Palestine. Really inspirational work where he started as an agronomist in the 1970s, realizing the devastating impacts of the occupation, the continuing devastating impacts of these agricultural models, monocrop and monoculture models, and then really fervently, actually, Saad speaking to groups of farmers, actually he has a humanistic farm, showing farmers that it can be done in a different way and that it should be done in a different way. We have no other choice as Palestinians under occupation. And you've got the young generation who is refusing to accept the status quo, the normalization of the occupation by these international aid agencies. They are pushing for these models of agribusinesses and technological parks in the heart of the Jordan Valley, in the heart of Jericho. These really rich areas, geographies, and rich in traditional knowledge being turned into these like air-conditioned technological parks for whatever reason, of course, to support that capitalist groups within Palestinian society to continue their model. But then we've got Suleiman village, facing the Israeli settlement on the other side of the hills, rehabilitating land in the village, starting community-supported agriculture, really thriving. But only recently, a week ago, they have shared pictures where allegedly, obviously, it's Israeli army of settlers have come in the middle of the night and have destroyed their beautiful setting where they have their workshops, where they have all the work that they do. But they're still going strong, and it's led by young people coming to realize the importance of food sovereignty beyond food production, they really do amazing work. And we've got also these beautiful grassroots initiatives that have really been instrumental in reviving agroecological networks and knowledges and seed sharing and seed preservation, like Vivian Sansour's work, who's done really amazing work. And we've got all those centralized seed banks that have also, in the face of all of these attempts of erasure that Israel has been carrying out since the beginning of the 19th centuries, have continued, to work really hard on preserving baladi seeds and supporting farmers to also continue growing traditional and baladi crops. And also, I know, and George will be speaking more about Gaza. But we wanted to also pay tribute and also acknowledge that all these stories of resilience and all these stories where farmers are doing all they can to be on the land is also marred with destruction and killing. And we really want to acknowledge farmer Youssef Abu Rabi' because Yusuf has been really instrumental, and he was really instrumental in giving us hope in the midst of genocide. When the North Gaza was suffering from famine and imposed starvation, Yusuf managed to reclaim some seeds from under the rubble and start really very slowly start growing those seeds amongst the rubble of his home, of his nursery, and then slowly also with other farmers come together to grow food again in North Gaza and provide some needed nourishment for the starving population. Unfortunately, of course, Israel has attacked Yusuf with a drone and killed him last year, end of October 2024. So we pay tribute to these farmers, and it's also our role and responsibility as fellow Palestinians, but also comrades all around the world, to not only rely on Palestinian resilience to do, or Palestinian farmers to do this work on their own. And then we also, hopefully in the Q&A, will be able to speak more about how that meaningful solidarity happens within principled agroecology networks and actors. Sorry, I'm taking longer but it's almost done. And I really wanted to pay tribute to Lina for doing this amazing work. She is a co-founder of the Palestinian Agroecological Forum, and she's really humble about it. But her, Saad, and others have been doing this extraordinary work to transform agroecology conversation, debates, and actual real work on the ground towards resilience, towards food sovereignty. It's really spreading a message and practices of agroecology and showing that it's not only necessary, but it's existential for us as Palestinians to not just be dragged into this capitalist and colonial modes of agriculture. And one last thing that Lina also wanted to share is that what they also are hoping for is that for the Palestinian Agroecological Forum to actually be a decentralized and a non-hierarchical and a really open conversation and an exchange of seeds, of knowledge, of practices that go beyond Palestine into kind of global networks of solidarity. So really, they do great work, and I hope you can also learn more about it and support them. And thank you so much. This was my role finished in giving the best that I can. Thank you so much. And now we give the floor to George. The floor is all yours. And I will time it around up to 20 minutes, if that's all right.
How much did you take?
I think I took longer than that.
Okay.
But I'm doing Lina and sharing.
That's fair.
No worries. No, we'll just try to leave 30 minutes for Q&A as well, as much. So I'll keep
May I have those slides, please? Thank you so much. So I've been working on a project with a group of Palestinian partners in Gaza since 2021. And it includes the Palestinian Hydrology Group, our opposite number at the University College of Applied Sciences, and a partner called the Gaza Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture Platform, which set up a group of a platform of 300 women farmers, and it's the first of its kind in Gaza. And so we were interested in working with these farming women, their processors, their farmers, their herders, and their fishers. So a diverse group of women. And we once talked about bringing them here or actually having them speak at this conference. And obviously, under the current conditions, it's not possible. So you'll have to make do with me, I'm afraid. So I wanted to start by telling you a couple of stories. That's done something very strange. My slides are obviously going to do something strange that's different from my screen. This is Huda, and she is a young Bedouin woman. She obviously herds her sheep in Gaza. She is very wedded and determined to protect Baladi foodways, which are the traditional food and farming systems. And she fought and won an argument with her family to allow her to attend school, which is very rare. and she uses traditional ethno-veterinary approaches, which she learned from her brother. And she is quite remarkable, and you can see women are herding between urban centres because of the population of Gaza, and people don't have much room. And at the top there is a woman who is now displaced, but she's in her tent. She has her sheep with her. And this is the situation for many of the herders, and many of the herders are women. We think probably about half of the herders in Gaza are women. And many children go out herding as well, which puts them at great risk. So in the top there, Huda is from Jabalia. And Jabalia is, you probably know all of this by now, we've seen a lot of maps of Gaza. Jabalia is up here. So traditionally, Huda would be herding in this area here. And this is a really high-risk area for farmers to be working. These areas, they're herding in these areas. We see a lot of children. I think between 2010 and 2022, 84 children, often herding, were caught in this no-go zone. And there are these security towers where they're actually manned and shooting at farmers that stray into this zone here. And some of them are actually remote controlled. So the farmers, many farmers have been killed in this area. This area here is, this is the so-called green line. This is the boundary. It's by no means a border. And the high fence is here. And then we've got a 300-metre, which is the absolute no-go zone. But then there's another 500 metres, which you can see. These are trees. This is farmland, and this is a really high-risk area to farm. But in fact, it's well known that some of the areas extend to 100 to 1,000 metres, and it's almost as if it's not clear to farmers. It's clear to the Israelis, but it's not clear to the farmers how far they can stray in the zone. So there's a safe zone, but it's in no way safe. So the farming livelihoods, one of the reasons that we looked at women in particular, because we realised that even though a quarter of people still depend on farming as their primary livelihood in Gaza, 2/3 of those are actually women, and they're invisible. So this is one of the reasons that we were working very closely with women. I think, as Muna said, food has been used as a weapon of war for the last 50 or more years of the 100-year war on Palestine. But it was until recently, remarkably self-sufficient in fruits and vegetables. Grains are another story, because along that eastern border is where the richer agricultural land is, and where people would have been growing grains. And so now a lot of the grain is imported. So as food as a weapon of war, it's difficult to condense this into one slide, but the regular air bombardments, which very often don't make the news, year on year, don't make the news. And the first things very often Israel takes out is the power station, which enables all of the sewage to be distributed and pumped and treated. And so that ends up going into the groundwater system. And polluting the groundwater system, which obviously is essential for people to drink and also to irrigate their crops. So regular incursions with bulldozers, which never make the news, destroy and rip out trees. And we've seen something like 112,000 trees in Gaza ripped out through these regular incursions since 2010. Olive trees, particularly. And I think here down in Operation Carsled in between 2008 and 2009, over 36 cattle and sheep were killed, and over 1 million poultry. So it's the specific targeting of poultry houses and greenhouses, and then we've seen also the herbicide spraying with Forensic Architecture did a study and found 53 separate incidents of herbicide spraying across the border. So it just kills all life in this in this zone here, even in the so-called safe zone where farmers are practicing. So it's an act of resistance for farmers to actually stray into these areas. They're intentionally farming these areas, also born of necessity, but also it's an act of resistance, and it's extremely risky. And so there are restrictions. So every time there's an incursion, every time there's a bombardment, every time there's a so-called war on Gaza, that there are restrictions on so-called dual-use equipment. So none of this equipment can be. So the Israelis talk about this aging infrastructure, and the Palestinians aren't able to maintain their infrastructure. But in fact, there are restrictions on this equipment coming in. And various international agencies have come in to build elements of solar managed solar sewage treatment, for instance, which is brilliant, but it actually needs to be pumped to the sewage treatment plant, and that needs the power station, and it needs fuel, and that is deliberately blocked each time. And then there is actually calorie counting, how many people there are in Gaza to allow the amount of food aid in, or just above the point of starvation. And that was proven to be taking place for a good number of years. So there's an experimentation on Palestinians. And of course, there's soil compaction. I mean, you'll all have seen the scenes and the satellite footage of just the devastation as the compaction of soil. So how long we all work with soil, right? So how long that will take. I think it's really interesting to see how the food system has been transformed by the situation over the last decades. So over this 18-year blockade, there's been a prioritization by the authorities and academics, agronomists, to intensify production in Gaza, to create this idea of food autonomy or the food security that they're looking for. And that's had devastating impacts on the water system as well. So part of the water today is undrinkable. The groundwater today is undrinkable because of sewage seeping into the groundwater, but also nitrates from fertilizers. And so in an attempt to create a food autonomy, all of the inputs are being imported from Israel. So we got some data from the Ministry of Agriculture, and in 2022, 4.6 million litres of fertilizers were going into Gaza, being paid for by Gaza, in Gaza. These are not gifts. And that's also going into the groundwater system. Over 1 million litres of herbicides and pesticides, and hundreds of thousands of tonnes of animal feed and input-dependent hybrid seed. So all of this is kind of displacing the traditional Baladi food system. I do need to say this, that it's really interesting to see that the whole of the occupied Palestinian territory is Israel's third largest export market, which I think is quite astonishing. And so as Baladi farmers are constrained, and their food systems are, so we have this, so NGOs are often paying for this industrialization of Gazan agriculture to provide food security. But at the same time, that's squeezing farmers. And we're seeing these sort of hybrid varieties flooding the market because they're high producing, they're flooding the market, and they're suppressing the price of local Baladi produce. And so we're seeing farmers go out of business. They're indebted because they're also seduced by this idea that they will also be able to produce more. But in producing more, they're becoming more indebted, so their costs of production are higher. And as their costs of production are higher, Israel imports its highly subsidized produce in just below cost of production for the farmers in Gaza. And so they're going out of business. And we're seeing more and more greenhouses. I mean, these are actually a huge target for Israel, right? But as farmers go out of business, they're then selling their land. And we're seeing either huge land markets and land speculation in Gaza, and elite accumulation of this land. And we're seeing increasing amounts of either industrial industrial greenhouses erected, and also the loss of farmland to development. So all of this is going on. So in many ways, Gaza is a microcosm of many of the challenges that are faced by farmers everywhere. I took one of Lina's slides on water. The aquifer, which sits below, obviously, the groundwater, the coastal aquifer in Gaza, is really important historically to production in Gaza. And today it's pretty much destroyed. And it's not just because and I should have had a map here, but the Gaza aquifer extends from Gaza right up through the coast of present-day Israel, and it's not just because of the overpopulation. Although we want to ask questions about why is that overpopulation, what led to the overpopulation and the crowding and the concentration of people in Gaza, why their water needs are so high. But it's not just the overpopulation in Gaza and the over-abstraction of water from the aquifer there. It's also the abstraction by Israel from that same aquifer for their own industrial agriculture, which is hugely intensive and massively subsidised. And then they desalinate that water because the aquifer has now had so much seawater intrusion that it's 95% saline. So it's collapsing. It's collapsed, and Israel desalinates because it's high tech and it's desalinating the water, and then it sells that water back into Gaza at a higher price. So I just wanted to point out it's not just because of the overpopulation in Gaza, but that all is there for a reason. I think we've all seen these shocking pictures of the destruction of agricultural land, and this comes from the recent 400 or plus page report from Forensic Architecture, which is a remarkable piece of research, and I would recommend anybody read it. It's quite shocking. So approximately 70% of Gaza's agricultural land and orchards have been destroyed. More than 3,700 greenhouses, which is 45% of all of the greenhouses. But if you add to that the amount of greenhouses that have been damaged and destroyed, that's 75% of all of the greenhouses destroyed. And 47% of the groundwater wells, as we've talked about, they've been destroyed, but they're also just collapsing under the strain, and they're massively polluted. And I think this is just, the idea that 83% of all plant life has been destroyed. This is ecocide as genocide. And so we talked a little bit about. We have a group emerging where we're talking about bioremediation of soils using myco and phytoremediation, and what kind of local bioaccumulators could be used if we couldn't get in. What can the women use? How do we test that? All of the universities have been destroyed. Their soil testing facilities have been totally destroyed. But I think there's just this idea of hope that nature recovers, people recover, people they fight back, and this idea of how we reimagine Gaza as an act of resistance, and work with people to reimagine that in a different way. So this was from Operation Protective Edge, and this is quite remarkable. In 3 months, this is how the ground, even with all of this compaction, how it was restored. But I think, and I need to look at my figures because I'm always shocked at this, but that was a 22-day. That was in 22 days that destruction was caused. But I think something like 80,000 tons of explosives have now been dropped on Gaza in the last 14 months, and counting. And so together we're thinking about what does Gaza look like after this, and what can we do together to support and to as an act of radical solidarity. What is our role here? And there are some really interesting people that we're working with thinking that through. And I'm so sorry, I meant to actually have a picture here rather than... So this idea about what Gaza looks like, there's a lot of day afterism around, and many of it is just, it signifies the kind of value to international capital that Gaza's destruction and reconstruction actually means. And most of them actually don't even mention food, which is quite striking. But those that do are very seduced by this idea of climate-smart agriculture and artificial intelligence. And of course, as many of us know, climate-smart agriculture is, the basis of it is a global alliance, which is led by agri-tech and agribusiness. And it claims to be, climate sensitive, and it makes all of these claims. But in fact, it will increase dependence on imports from Israel. So quite apart from what we might feel about this global alliance and what their, profit incentives are, when we consider that sewage infrastructure can't even be repaired, we think that Israel is going to allow, all of this technology in, and how intensive this kind of production is, and whether that's viable, whether that's desirable. But it's certainly seductive to a lot of people that we speak to in Gaza. And I won't talk about agroecology, but obviously rooted in people's food, people's relationship with the land, and using baladi seeds, which are well adapted already to the saline conditions of Gaza, the heat, the climatic changes, and have been, the heritage. They are heritage varieties. They're heirloom. They literally have been passed from one generation to another. So on that, I wanted to kind of tell you a story about Hanadi. Hanadi and her father, Salama, actually established and ran Gaza's only heritage seed library or bank. And they had collected 33 seed types. They were training farmers to multiply the seed, and they had plans to expand and had already started expanding. And so this is the seed bank, and they had an amazing training centre as well. So and we welcome people to talk about seed and agroecological baladi farming practices. Thank you. And this is it today. It's destroyed in December. We're really relieved that Hanadi and Salama made it out, to say that all of the 300 women are still alive, and 20% of them are still producing. And there they have been displaced to Deir Bala, and this is a piece of land they've rented, and they've managed to locate the seed that was out for multiplication with different farmers, and they've started planting to multiply. And this is why seed is so important, because the hybrid seed that had been part of Gaza's intensive food system wouldn't have survived this. It couldn't have been replanted. So in this sense, the baladi food system and the baladi seed is what people have. And it's not just a coping strategy. Many people are talking about it as a great coping strategy, and when all of this is over, we'll just go back to intensive production. But this tells a story about how people are reclaiming land as well in the rubble, like Yusuf's story as well, reclaiming that land and planting the baladi seeds and returning to the land. And this is the essential element of reclaiming the commons, because it's the seed is the commons, and the knowledge that people hold to use and plant that seed is part of the knowledge commons, and that cannot be taken away. So I just wanted to leave on some ideas. So with the women themselves, what they're doing is there are many community kitchens around Gaza. The solidarity and the care that is in evidence as people care for one another. Some of this food is going into food kitchens that they're producing. We know about baladi seed recovery from Hanadi and Salama. And there's a solidarity marketing initiative. And before the war, 18 tons of produce was created they created packages from 50 women farmers, and they would deliver it to 200 of the most vulnerable families in their area. And actually since this war, since October, another 15 tons has been harvested, which is quite remarkable and distributed. So it may be olives and dates and other things that people are growing. And so this idea of care and solidarity is something, a really amazing story that comes out of this most incredible situation. And many of the women were also graduates of food and farming studies. And the extension services in Gaza never had women, or there were a couple of women extensionists, and a woman in Gaza needs, if somebody's going to come into their home, it needs to be a woman extensionist. And this was never really made available because women farmers are invisible, of course. So the women themselves now are coming out of this, are in the process of setting up a farming advisory service for women by women. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And they're using WhatsApp, they've got a call centre. And then one of the things that is now in discussion is to create a solidarity cafe where it's warm, there's access to internet, people can come and study, they can come and research maybe their soil or, different things. And it's going to be around providing coffee, conviviality and care, as I like to say, which is incredible. And I think that we think the Farmer Advisory Service could also be in the same place. However, there is a nervousness about creating a place for gathering because where people gather, they're a target. We know many students who are gathering around an internet point to actually gain access to their educational materials, and they've been targeted. So, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about this, we have an article, and we've got some copies here in Roosted magazine. And on the cover, which is beautiful, is the women collecting dates in October, just this last October. And then a recent report, which is longer, which I co-authored with a colleague from Gaza. And because I think, so as a research project, we're using feminist political ecology as our lens, and I didn't want to end without naming some of these women. And if I can say so, Haneen has, she's amazing. She has a plant nursery, a beautiful plant nursery. She had a plant nursery, I believe, in Khan Yunis. Zainab is a baker, and she specialises in indigenous grains and gluten-free baking. Amal, her husband, was a farmer as well, but he was shot in the spine when he was trying to access their farmland on the boundary, and so now she's the primary breadwinner for the family. So she collects eggs from other women and they sell them on the market. Sama, obviously, beekeeper. Madeleine is the only woman in Gaza with her own fishing boat. Her father was also injured, and she fought to leave school. Unlike Huda, she fought to leave school so that she could run the family boat. And she connects traditional food and fish, because fish is such an important part of the Gaza diet and culture. And Hanadi also here grows herbs like za'atar and dries them. It's a technique she learned from her mother. And these women, I'm sorry, I don't know their names, but this was during the midst of one of the worst bombardments in this present phase of the war, and they are making sweets to celebrate a religious holiday, and they've come together. So we often see these pictures of women, these devastating pictures of women mourning their loved ones and all of this loss. But these women are still here. These women are still fighting for their food and fighting to maintain the connections with each other and with the land. And I also just want to say we have two amazing women who are still in Gaza who are doing all of this work with these women. So I just wanted to say that, I'll offer a mark of respect to my colleagues, Ala and Fatin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doris, and then we'll head up Cathi. And just realizing I also have always do a terrible job at chairing events. But yeah, we'll hear from Cathi, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A, I promise. So I'll be like maybe a bit strict with it.
Yeah, I'll listen.
On your...
Thank you. Can we have the slideshow up, please? Thank you. So hopefully many of you will have heard of Zaytoun or have seen Zaytoun products in shops. We started 21 years ago now as a solidarity initiative. We've been out to spend time in farming communities in the West Bank, helping people access their land and bring their harvest home safely, and advocate for them in many ways that we could. And at that time, that season was a bumper olive harvest, and olive oil was flowing from the presses. But they had no way of exporting independently, and they were selling their oil at below the cost of production, often to Israeli traders who would mix it with other cheaper olive oils. So they weren't getting the return for it. The olive trees in the West Bank are... oops, it's not... Yeah, I'll go back. That was some of our early bottles, early labels. That's a beautiful olive tree, probably a couple of thousand years old. They are astonishing trees, and they are everywhere on the terraced hills of the West Bank, and they are a part and parcel of every Palestinian family's life. They view the trees as their children, so this is not just about economic return, it is, as Muna was saying, it's about a story of the people and their land. So we crowdfunded before that was ever a thing, before social media or GoFundMe. When we got back home, we emailed friends and family emailed their friends and family, and before long, this is also before the days of digital banking, people were sending us cheques and cash in the post, saying, yes, please, I'll have a bottle of olive oil, I'll have a case of olive oil, whenever it comes, it doesn't matter, hang on to the money, trust that it'll turn up. And that beating heart of community action is still very much where we're at, connecting community to community, communities here to communities in Palestine. People want and need a tangible way to connect and show solidarity with people in Palestine. We don't work currently with anyone in Gaza. We haven't managed to since the blockade began 2016, several years ago now. We used to import maftool from Gaza, and one day hopefully we will be able to again. So it is a West Bank initiative. We very much hope to offer a solution in terms of income support to farming families, but we also celebrate the culinary and farming heritage of families in the West Bank and the incredible quality of what they produce. We're a community interest company, so their communities and the community of buyers and supporters here are what we're about. That's some of our products. So since we started with olive oil, we then added medjool dates in the Jordan Valley, frike, which is a very traditional Palestinian spring wheat, like smoky spring wheat, maftool, which is like a giant couscous, almonds, both raw and caramelised and chili, and za'atar. We've also got olive oil soap, and lately we've added Dead Sea salt from the only Palestinian family who has access to the Dead Sea. And this is really to help diversify a family's income so that it doesn't all depend on the olive oil, and to offer different aspects of Palestinian farming and culinary heritage to our customers. So we support about, through the Palestinian Fair Trade Association, who we buy from. We support over 2,000 family farms across about 52 villages, mostly in the Jenin area, which is to the north of the West Bank. And we also buy medjool dates from the Jordan Valley, which supports about 945 farming families in high season. And that's both very much in the growing, but also in the packing and processing and quality control and all of it that goes into exporting to an international market. We also support the initiative Trees for Life, run by the Palestine Fair Trade Association. Zaytoun customers have been amazing. They're the biggest single donor to this planting programme, and to date 232,000 trees, saplings, have been distributed to Palestinian farmers. The PFTA supports those farmers whose land has been impacted by the occupation, who've lost trees to growing settlements and to wanton destruction by armed settlers who come and burn trees in groves. Priority is given to young people and women who are starting out in farming. So we offer this as a sponsorship scheme. We also have always collaborated with other organisations to offer trips, olive picking trips and tours of different aspects of Palestinian farming landscape. We haven't been able to do that for a couple of years now, but hopefully we will be able to once again. And that's important to us because we're nurturing the connection between people in Britain and people in Palestine. We're nurturing the storytelling, the narratives, and people come back inspired from Palestine and take those stories to their own communities and put on events in village halls to really share what they've seen firsthand. And it's often life-changing for people when we take them out. So we sell now to grassroots communities who form buying groups, fair trade groups, different religious community initiatives, also to wholesalers, to shops, and to restaurants. We just celebrated our 20-year anniversary and figured out that we had sent £14 million in purchase to Palestinian producers over those 20 years. And we've imported 2 million kilograms of products. So it's nice to see that we do have an impact. And that impact is very much in terms of income. This is Hada, who came over to the UK a few years ago. He talks about farming as his way of life. He was able to give up his work in an Israeli settlement. So a lot of Palestinians in the West Bank unfortunately have to, just to make a living, to work in the illegal Israeli settlements that are built on the West Bank. Their work is dangerous. They have no rights to sick pay, holiday pay. Their pay is often below Israeli minimum wage. And the travel there takes a very long time and is often fraught with danger. So Hada was able to give up his settlement job and now works full-time on his farm with his family. Oh, that's a little shot. So that's Taysir Abbasi on the right, on your left. Yeah, your left, with the grey jumper. He's our liaison officer in Palestine. He's been with us from the start, putting us in touch with cooperatives and farmers. And that's Mohammed Hamada on your right, who is discovering some of the bottles which hopefully contain some of his olive oil from his co-op in a British shop. It means a lot to them to see their products on our shop shelves and to know that people are seeing produce of Palestine on the labels and are understanding that Palestine is even a country, because some people still don't realise that Palestine is a country. So to walk in and see produce of Palestine on a shop shelf means a lot to them. We worked with the cooperatives in the West Bank to pioneer the world's first ever fair trade certified olive oil. We convinced the Fair Trade Foundation and the other certifying bodies that it was needed, and they drew up the standards working with Palestinian producers for the world's first ever fair trade olive oil back in 2009, which is an incredible achievement. A lot of hard work went into that from the producers and their co-ops. And it opened up the market here to most of the wholesalers didn't take our olive oil before fair trade certification, and it just really opened up the market to Palestinian olive oil, and almonds soon followed in terms of fair trade certification. Not all the producers choose to certify. Those that certify as fair trade also certify as organic, but it involves a lot of paperwork and inspections, and not everyone chooses to do that. So we also offer uncertified olive oil too, to support those farmers. So we support the resilience of producers under a brutal military occupation. We also support the longevity of their heritage. This is Bassema Barahme, who also came to tour Britain several years ago. And she's speaking about she's making maftool, which is like the couscous. Maftool means rolled, I think, is that right? Fatala means to roll something. Yeah, so she's rolling the grains there to make maftool, and she talks about being able, through her job, through her income, and also through her leadership position in the cooperative, about training the next generation of women to carry on that heritage. So the resilience is about traditional farming, family farms, as both the other speakers mentioned, Baladi farming, preserving centuries-old heritage and a culture of high-quality food that's grown on family lands. Regenerative farming as an answer to climate change is increasingly prominent, and the Palestine Fair Trade Association, who we work with, supports training and best practice sharing, focusing on soil health, water retention, biodiversity, seed banks, and fertility of the soil. And as has been mentioned before, climate resilient farming in terms of bringing through the traditional skills, the heritage, rather than focusing on anything like climate smart AI. This is really about small scale, rich knowledge that's already embedded in Palestine, and facilitating that and supporting that to carry on. So Palestine Fair Trade Association very much run training programs and facilitate community to community dialogue around that. This is Awad Melhim, talking about carrying on those practices, preserving moisture and fertility in the soil. Sorry, that slide doesn't come out very well. So this is Doha. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that West Bank farmers face. Doha spoke at the ORFC a couple of years ago online. She's an incredible woman in Bahrain. She's a host of international volunteers, she's a cook, she's a community leader, and she's a farmer. So she spoke to us about military closure of the land, which happens often. It's just declared a closed military zone, and you can't harvest or tend to your trees or your crops. Land beyond the wall. So the apartheid wall runs inside the Green Line, the international boundary between present-day Israel and Palestine. The apartheid wall that was built several years ago runs inside the Palestinian territory. So the land between the apartheid wall and the boundary, the Green Line, is the seam zone. And it's very difficult for communities to access that land. And so crops deteriorate, soil health deteriorates, fertility is lost. Many communities are cut off from their lands by the wall and by a series of checkpoints throughout the land. And settler attacks. Settler attacks have been increasing. I think last year was the worst on record since records began of attacks on farmers by settlers who have been armed by the Israeli government since the attack on Gaza began. She says these are our groves on our ancestral lands, but we have to get permits from the Israeli authorities to go and pick them. Often when families are given permits, it might be given to one or two members of the family, sometimes even like the oldest grandfather in the family. Olive picking is a whole family affair. It takes 2 weeks. Traditionally, the whole family would be out in the fields, in the groves, to pick and bring their harvest home. So yeah, the permit system and checkpoint and gate system really hampers that. The occupation is systematically destroying and undermining the Palestinian agriculture economy. It's held up by the use of ancient laws. There's an ancient Ottoman law that says that land is open to confiscation if not tended for, I think, 2 or 3 years. That's often brought into play. Government subsidies for settlements, which are growing at a fast pace in the West Bank, and military enforcement of eviction of families from their land, and they have to leave their harvest. Even if they've been out all day harvesting olives, they often have to leave their harvest there if they're told to go home by the Israeli military. Water and resource theft has been mentioned already. I won't go into that, but traditional small-scale water collection systems have been destroyed. Permits aren't given for new wells. So just in terms of drinking water, that's devastating. But for anything that needs irrigation, it makes life very difficult. So luckily, with Baladi agriculture, the seeds and the crops that are grown are water-resistant and very drought-resistant and very well adapted to the climate and the land that they're grown on. 2 minutes, okay. I'll rattle through this. That's my next slide. West Bank situation. This was a few months ago, and the olive harvest in October was beset by settler attacks and violence. Despite that, all the farmers we work with got out and harvested their olives and brought the olive oil to the processing, and we managed to get shipments out. We are continually humbled and awed by their steadfastness and their ability to go to their lands no matter what and tend and harvest their crops. Markets for Palestinian agricultural produce in the West Bank towns are cut off by checkpoints, so they can't. It's very hard, as has been mentioned, to sell at markets inside Palestine. Access to markets in Israel is barred unless products are packaged and sold by Israeli agricultural companies like Carmel Agrexco and Edom. So I'll wrap up now because I've only got a couple of minutes left. But maybe could we show the YouTube film? Have you got that? On the subject of storytelling, I just want to leave the last few words to Palestinian voices. And just to say that this is about more than a source of income for Palestinians. Farming their lands means honouring Palestinian history, identity, their self-expression, and a resistance to the Israeli state's attempts to break the link between the people and their land. Yassir Abu Al-Rub, who's a farmer that we were in contact with, said, "My deep connection to the land is rooted in all the time spent accompanying my father to the field since childhood. Now I am dedicated to instilling the same love of land, love for my land, into the hearts of my own children." And if we could have the Doha film just to finish off, I'll leave it with her.
الأمل برب العالمين لازم إحنا دائما نتفائل، لأنه نقطة مهمة، إحنا أصحاب حق وهي أرضنا وأرض آبائنا وأجدادنا. جيل الشباب اليوم الحمد لله يعني كان قبل فترة الاهتمام معدوم. هسه في قبول وفي كثير إقبال على الزراعة، يعني تقدر تقول 80%. لأنه كمان بالنسبة لأنه الأرض إذا إحنا ما اشتغلناها يعني المستوطنين بقول لك هاي الأرض مش مزروعة وهي إلنا وإحنا بدنا نشتغلها، ما حدا زارعها ولا حدا واصلها، مع إنه في نفس الوقت يعني في أراضي كثير إلنا. أنا شخصيا إلي أرض لما أروح أوصلها بداهموني بوحشية، بداهموني، بدي أروح أزرع، بدي أروح أحرث، بدي أروح أعمل إشي، يعني ما بقدر. يعني في عندي موثق، وهسه فرجيكم يعني عندي موثق كيف المستوطن هاجم علي. أنا مرة كبيرة مش صغيرة وشاب مستوطن يعني في العشرينات، عمره انطارت 30 سنة، انطارت هاجم علي بوحشية. احنا مصايبنا جميعها من وراء الاحتلال. طبعا التغير المناخي كثير مهم وكثير بيأثر على المزروعات، بيأثر على البشر، بيأثر مش بس على المزروعات. يعني بالنسبة للمزروعات الموسم، إذا زرعنا في شهر عندك إشي بنزرعه إشي اسمه صيفي، بنزرعه في شهر آخر 3 وشهر 4 بنزرعه. تخيل إذا أشتت مباشرة عليه في إشي مثل السمسم بخرب، وإذا ما أشتت برضه في كثير بخرب. إذا ما أشتت لأنه لازم ينبت في الأول، فلما ما تشتيش غالبيته بخرب. ليش؟ لأنه إحنا بدنا نحاول نجيب مية ونسقي. هسا إحنا عندنا المية مسروقة من قبل الإسرائيليين. 85% من مياه الضفة الغربية الاحتلال سارقها ولصالح المستوطنين. اطلع عندهم سارقين الأراضي منا ومعبية عنب ومعبية خضار، لأنه كل المي عندهم. إحنا بتجينا المي في الأسبوع مرة، ومع التغيير المناخي ماكلين هوا. وين المناخ الطبيعي وين الاحتلال الإسرائيلي؟
Hopefully you could all see the subtitles. I'm not sure if they were clear. It is on our YouTube channel. Just look up Zaytoun UK, Zaytoun CIC, Manal, what is it? Yeah. So Zaytoun UK on YouTube. Yeah, you'll find it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Cathi. Thank you, George. And thank you to the audience also for your patience. And we'll take the questions now. And please just say your name and be precise with the questions so that we can maybe hopefully get a few, because we've got also audience online. If you want, Julian.
Shall I kick off with the ones that have come in? There's only 3. Georgina asks, it was mentioned that industrial agriculture and techno-science applications in agriculture contribute to the normalisation of occupation. Could this idea be developed a little further, please?
Okay, yes. But can we take maybe one or two, and then that will, if anybody wants to contribute.
And then we're done with these. Emily says, this is from a Scottish flower grower, and she says, what was the name of the study which stated that 85% of plant life has been destroyed in Gaza?
Okay. Okay, great. I can say a bit about the techno, because that's the work that I do usually. But just kind of thinking about kind of this separation between people and nature, people and their sources of existence and on the land. And the idea is that these agri-technological and agribusinesses and technological part are contributing to this way of life, the commodified way of life, of like thinking of food as something that we do separately to just ensure that we get, as I said before, like enough food to survive, sustenance. But at the other end of it is that in the Palestinian context, technology is used as a way to normalize the occupation. So first of all, in access to water, we say, oh, well, we build desalination plants for Gaza, but we do not really ensure that through international pressure that Israel actually relinquishes its hegemony over water resources. So Palestinians do not have access to their groundwater. So they should go for desalination plants that are environmentally catastrophic. Second of all, that are very at a high price in a population that has been suffering for decades from high levels of poverty and siege and today genocide. So these technological solutions are always advanced as kind of a way out of a crisis. Like we see the climate crisis and our food systems crisis. It's all about, there's a new technology, there's climate smart agriculture, there's AI, and there's so much. But I think it's also, of course, obfuscating that the reality of the matter is we need the system change rather than finding these solutions, just band-aid solutions. And that's why it normalizes the occupation when we say, they just rely on technology, rely on high-yielding crops or export. And this,
the study was forensic architecture, and I think it's dated July this year. And it's a comprehensive study of the destruction of all of the different sectors, including the agriculture sector. Yeah.
Right. The audience, without further ado, anybody wants to yeah? Oh, can you just use the mic, please? That would be lovely.
Hi, thank you very much for an excellent workshop. What action can we sitting in this room today take literally within the first 5 minutes of walking out the door, or certainly by the end of today? Because I'm sure, well, I'll speak for myself, the sense of inadequacy, not being able to take any action, feeling useless, can be very overwhelming. So even if it's something as simple as buying more of the Zaytoun products, making sure that shops that I know at home in Ireland are stocking them, etc., sponsoring a tree, what can we actually do and what action can we take?
That's a great question. Please, I have the speakers first, and I can say.
We got some stickers on the front. You could get busy with some boycott Israeli produce stickers, and you can take some away. But do get some online. You can buy them in sheets and sheets, and you can just get busy in shops around your area. And I would boycott not just produce that comes from illegal Israeli settlements, but I would boycott all Israeli products. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can engage with some of those? So I work in the world of community gardens, social innovation, etc. So I'm just wondering how and when can we link in with some of those seed banks, the other initiatives, whether it's by donating, even just the all-important words of support, but, again, practical, feasible, long-term strategic actions. Is there a way to connect?
No, I mean, there's so much. Yeah, so much.
I mean, it is actually possible to get funds into Gaza, which does surprise people. And so I don't have a number anywhere, but I would like to be able to share that information with people. So if you want to have a chat with me, there are so many GoFundMes, but there are specific funds that can be generated for the seed house, for instance, and for Yusuf's. Before he was targeted, there was funding coming internationally for the work that he was doing in Gaza. So it's possible to actually directly support.
Brilliant. What we might do as well is see if we can get that information out to the organisers so it can be shared widely across the entire conference.
There's a session later on today as well on solidarity, building solidarity.
So it's going to be in the Magic Common Room at 4.
Okay.
Which is here, in this building.
The story, yeah.
Okay,
and I wanted to say, it goes beyond the purchasing power and that kind of direct support, as we all got the tools and we've got the skills to do what we can, whether it's storytelling, whether it is, being engaged actively with farmers and forging solidarities. And that have been, the case for so many decades in Palestine. Zaytoun is a great example of that, forging solidarities and finding mechanisms to do it that benefit farmers directly. But the solidarity campaign also has so many facets to it that you can engage in so many ways. And just, to be informed, to make sure that you form alliances and not to make these assumptions about, Palestinians might need this or that. Talk to people. People are willing to forge those partnerships and long-term strategies of food resilience and sovereignty, like I mentioned with the forum that Lina and Saad and others are really forging. So these are ways to get involved, is to be there, use your skills and your conviction and the kind of commitment. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, and it's not immediate, but it can be, is the Union of Agricultural Workers Committee, UAC, in the West Bank. They also have a branch in Gaza, so they've been, and they're the representative of La Via Campesina in Palestine. So they've been doing work with people around food distribution in Gaza, and we hope, and I don't know enough about it, whether it's coming hopefully from local farmers. I think that will be what they'll be working towards. But in the West Bank, they also have, they also create opportunities to go out to Palestine and protect the olive farmers who are, and to be part of the olive harvest. At which time of year? August, September?
September, yeah. For September, October, November. It depends. Side says that November.
So if you're really feeling like it, you can actually hit the ground with your boots and go and work with the olive harvesters. Yeah.
Just to add, so I'm working for the conference team, so I could get those links, the direct links, and see if they can go out on social media so people can access that easily. And just on that kind of community initiatives linked to kind of boycott, but also supporting Palestinian products. In Bristol, where I live, we've been organising in communities to create like apartheid-free zones based on what they did during South African apartheid. And that's also involved like quite a lot of door knocking, which has been a really great way, I think, to kind of speak and have conversations with people that aren't already involved. So people have chosen an area where they think that would be likely to be achieved, have been getting signatures to say that people would boycott shops if they have those products, and then trying to create whole zones where shops are kind of not stocking Israeli products, but then obviously also offering alternatives like Zaytoun. And so that's quite a nice kind of creating those spaces on the ground and supporting in different ways. So I'm happy to share info about that if you like.
Great. There's one here. The back.
Hello. Thanks so much for your talk. It was very hard not to break down the emotional weight of what you shared, for me at least. Like, I think the whole room, there's like the grief, witnessing the genocide and the outrage for me. How do you cope with such heavy emotional burden, and how do you not get overwhelmed with that, responding in hatred towards what the Israelis are doing? Like, to me, that's just, a really big question on my mind. Thanks.
I'd leave that to the Palestinian on the panel.
No, it's such a devastating time, to be honest, and the fact that every time you witness atrocities, it kind of brings up the kind of intergenerational trauma that you know that it was there, but it kind of keeps bringing it up and exposing it. And I think most strikingly, and Lina wanted to share this as well, is that the fact that she lives in Ramallah and her family is in Nablus, and even that kind of way to get to see her parents has become so transformed even in the last few months. So you can imagine how much is that a toll is building up on our own kind of emotional, psychological well-being, in addition to our kind of existence on the land. So let alone kind of thinking about what farmers, go through when they know that there is a compounded threat that is coming closer and closer to their land, to their own lives. And so I think, yes, hatred is very much legitimate at this stage, but also kind of filled with, I think, Palestinian pride and kind of conviction that we are the rightful owners of the land. So I think from that place, I feel there remains a sense of not only hope. Resilience also is a word that has been not co-opted by so many, like food resilience, like so many of those concepts that we hold dear, and we know that it means so much. It's radical in its core. So I think it's the resilience and the perseverance that kind of helps us cope. Then you see what people in Gaza are doing. George has shared the amazing initiatives that are coming out of nothing, that really show that it's ingrained in our kind of identity and ingrained in our, we will not give up. It's our struggle. Our struggle is a struggle for right for self-determination and a struggle to exist on our land, and we will do it in every way under any conditions. But what we need, and I think what helps us cope, is the solidarity. And I think a lot of people in Gaza have shared this, is that when they see people being out on the street in the big marches, when people actually telling their stories and giving them the right kind of voice, I think that is what matters. When we don't really shy away, when we don't turn a blind eye, and when we kind of confront injustice in the eye and say this is wrong, this gives people hope that it continues. And it has given Palestinians hope for so long. I know maybe like Cathi also with the work that Zaytoun does is really like transforming relations and lives and giving back to people the dignity that they deserve and appreciation to like the knowledge they have, the way they tended to the land for so long under these circumstances. So how do we cope is to make sure that the struggle continues in global sense, and that it's also based on justice, and that it's not really that it doesn't stop. So I think coping. Difficult question. There's a question there, and first, yes, out of time. So we have to leave, or we cannot have 5 minutes more. 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you. And then we'll take these two questions, one here and one here. Thank you. So let's start with you, because you raised your hand first, if it's possible. Thank you.
Oh, me, sorry. I just wondered what the UK government's role in all of this is. I mean, obviously they're famously selling arms to Israel, but is there other, are you talking to the UK government about supporting some amazing efforts? Is there anything coming out in kind of the international development budget? Are you having those conversations? Does this new government pose any more opportunities than the previous one? Seems like you're all just shaking your head.
No, it's shameful, to be honest. And I would say that what has been proven in Gaza is that international aid, again, is a farce, and it doesn't work. And it's actually making Palestinians more susceptible to those kind of abrupt changes that leave them with nothing. And we saw how international aid did not really come to the aid of any Palestinians until today. It's the Palestinians themselves. And we've written a piece recently with a colleague, Omar Jaber Salamanca, and one of the things that we said, like, Gaza survived because of Gazans, and this is kind of a UNICEF spokesperson who is based in Gaza said, like, it's because of Gazans that Gaza survived. It's not because of international aid. It's not because of anything else. So that kind of, especially in the case of the UK's government, shameful kind of complicity, and like so much that we can say about how horrible they have and how complicit they are. So I would say, again, it's back to the civil society that is principled, and it's up to those institutions, maybe some more principled organization, to step up, and of course individuals. And
it's becoming more difficult. Yeah. Though. It's becoming more difficult in academia and other spheres to be vocal. So.
Here, 1, 2. Yes.
One more.
If you can, just that gentleman there, and then there's somebody over there. Thank you.
Thank you all for speaking and the work that you're doing, Lina. I'll just speak for a moment. I was going to ask a question about research that's been done around the non-native trees that have been planted in Palestine. That was led by Joseph Weitz and the Jewish National Fund. So any thoughts on that? Brilliant. But if you don't have time, I just wanted to say, George, you highlighted Madeline. She's in an amazing documentary which was produced and directed called Shanshula. So if anyone in here hasn't seen it, it's like a 35-minute film by and it's directed by Moshe Al-Falala, Sheffield Palestinian Solidarity Chair. So I just wanted to add that. Any thought, I can chat to you afterwards, any research on that.
Please. And the last question, if you're still willing. Sorry, and that would be... Yes, please.
Before it sort of got into this stage, I was looking... Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was looking at women wage peace and women of the sun.
Can you just...
Have you heard of them? And so then, of course, we've got into this stage, and I don't know what has really happened going forwards with those women who were obviously working together really hard for peace, and I just wonder whether there are still, whether there's support coming from Israel, from from Jewish people towards the Palestinians, still working forwards. People of the land, women, I don't know. Hope.
So women working for peace. Yeah.
Because I know that there will be people, but
I don't know about that plan. Do you know?
You've not heard of that?
I think that there was a march, wasn't there, many in 2014 and quite a number of years ago with Palestinians in 48 in Israel, and Palestinian women in Israel and Jewish Israelis. So, but I'm not aware. I think the Israeli space is also a very, very difficult place, and the left is shrinking. The radical left is shrinking or has left. Who can blame them? And I think that it's a very difficult space for them to be active.
And if it's confined within those spaces of peace being, just accepting the status quo and realizing that there will be always privilege and hierarchy where the Jewish Zionists will live under better conditions than the rest, and not kind of giving land back and acknowledging that the harms that have been done because of this settler colonial project. I think at the end of the day, it ends up being more detrimental to the struggle rather than supportive. But I do also think that there are these very small pockets and small individuals that are trying to do their best. But I think this genocide has showed that it's almost like non-existent, it's there. I don't know. I cannot tell more about it, but thank you all so much.
Lina was supposed to be on our panel tomorrow morning, and